Good afternoon. Good afternoon. David Hughes here from the Emporium Creative Hub. Welcome to another studio sessions. Really excited this week to be talking about creativity in health, and something that I think is kind of at the forefront of a lot of people's minds at the moment. I'm joined by three fantastic panelists today. Before I get into introductions, though, I do just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting today. Pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And for myself, and I believe probably for yourself, Rob, as well, it's the Jajawurrung of the Kulin Nation. Is that correct for you, Rob? I believe it is. And Sandro and Jim, what about you guys? Who were the traditional owners for you?
I'm on Wurundjeri land of the Woiwurrung clan.
Very good. Sandro? Sandro. It sounds like Sandro's on mute again. We might just try and fix that little problem. There we go. Okay. Whilst we try and just resolve those issues, I might just do a quick introduction of our panelists today. So we do have with us today Dr. Sandro Demaio, who is currently CEO of VicHealth. He's previously worked for the World Health Organization and the EAT Foundation, amongst many other things. Sandro is the author of the Doctor's Diet Cookbook and co-hosts the popular ABC television and Netflix show Ask the Doctor. So welcome, Sandro. We also have Jim Rimmer from VicHealth as well, and Jim is a senior project officer for mental wellbeing and arts with the Victorian Health Promotion Foundation, which is VicHealth. Jim has over 20 years experience in the arts, and he's a passionate advocate for the power of the arts, for living expressively, and for the community benefits generated by the creative sector. And finally, we have Dr. Rob Blum as well, joining us from Bendigo Health. He's Director of Medical Oncology. And as part of his focus on services and programs, he introduced the music program in 2019 to deliver music into the cancer centre for the benefit of not just the patients, but of the staff as well. And Rob is also an accomplished musician and performer in his own right, and sits on the board of the local Alhambra Foundation. Welcome, everyone. Now, I'll see if we've managed to resolve any of the audio issues we were having. Rob, can you hear me? I'm not sure Rob can. Jim, you can, can't you?
I can hear you, yes. Thanks.
And Sandro, you can hear us? I think Sandro can hear us, but we can't hear him. So maybe we will kick off with a bit more of an introduction, because I do have a bit more to say before these guys come in. They may have their phones on silent or something like that. So we will just plow on regardless. So the idea that the creative expression can make a powerful contribution to the healing process has been embraced by many cultures over millennia, and people have often used pictures and dance and song in parts of the healing process. The World Health Organization actually defines holistic health as viewing man in his totality within a wide ecological spectrum, and emphasizing the view that ill health or disease is brought about by an imbalance or disequilibrium of man in his total ecological system, and not only by the causative agent and pathogenic evolution. Bit of a mouthful there, but basically there's been an increased acceptance that health is being defined as more than just an absence of illness. Now, VicHealth has quite a few strategies that do address this, and I might just throw over to you, Jim, for a moment to ask you a question about some
it's not solid.
VicHealth's strategies, and I think we've got Rob back online now. Is that correct? Can you hear me, Rob? No, but we
can hear Rob.
But we can hear Rob. Anyway, Jim, some of your VicHealth's creative initiatives look to improve health outcomes through increasing and improving social connections, which I can only assume has become much harder through the whole COVID pandemic. Has it become harder during isolation and lockdown? And are we going to see a decline in the overall health of Victorians and global population as a result of less opportunities to socially connect, do you think? And if so, is there anything we can do to address this?
I'd say certainly the social connection has been a real challenge across the pandemic, and certainly the experience that is of Victorians has been different in different regions of the state. So metropolitan Melbourne and Mitchell Shire have had quite a different and more severe lockdown environment than many of our compatriots in regional Victoria. So that's something that we're very aware of as an agency, is working to the situation of the different communities that we're working in. Social connection has really transitioned to a lot of online engagement, and that in itself has raised issues around digital access and inclusivity. It certainly can't be assumed that that everybody has the same access to digital channels. But there's been some really creative responses as well. Like there are people that are not just in a digital environment, but in a physical environment. So some people might be aware of the Spoonville initiative of creating characters out of wooden spoons and erecting little street parties in public sphere environments. Just so that as you're walking down the street, you might come by a little spoon party, and so there's been that's generated a lot of activity on social media, people taking photos and posting and hashtagging, etc. Similarly, teddy bears in windows and rainbow symbols. So although it has been very, very challenging for many people, I think there have been a lot of creative responses that have addressed people's desire to share, both in a physical and online realm.
And I noticed this week that the National Arts Participation Survey, the results of that were released by the Australian Arts Council of Australia, Australian Arts Council.
Yes.
And there was a strong focus in that, I noticed, about wellness and connectivity. And it was interesting because the whole survey was done just before the whole COVID lockdown. And there was a strong focus in that on how people engage with creativity, engage with the arts as a way to connect with others and as a way to promote their own well-being and health. So there's definitely something in that.
It's very heartening. There was a big increase so this is a 4-year timestamp survey, and this is the 4th iteration. So since the 2016 results, there'd been an 11% increase in community recognition for the health and well-being and social cohesion benefits of arts participation, and that's a magnificent result that the public are so aware of those benefits. Perhaps there's maybe a little bit of work to do with some of our politicians.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we might come back to that aspect, that particular topic regarding funding, perhaps, and politicians and things like that. But I might just bring Dr. Sandro Demaio into the conversation now. I believe you can hear me and I can hear you now. Is that correct?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Welcome. And
thank you.
I wanted to have a quick chat with you actually about VicHealth and the strategies that you have around arts and creativity. I note that VicHealth now are into their 4th strategy around arts creativity. So it's a 2019 to 2023 strategy, so released last year. This particular one has focus on 3 key areas: increasing participation and diversity in the arts, embedding the arts and creative industries across our work, and harnessing arts and cultural settings as powerful enablers to influence awareness, attitude, and behaviour. And I think that all that's great. I suppose my question to you is, why has it been important for VicHealth to have these strategies for so long around arts and creativity when you are essentially a health foundation?
Yeah, it's a good question, David. To understand, in fact, our history in arts, you have to go right back to our genesis in 1987, when we were the world's first hypothecated tax on tobacco funded health promotion foundation. And the idea of the foundation, as I said, it was the first in the world at the time, tax tobacco, use the money to buy out tobacco sponsorship of key public festivals, arts activities were a big part of that, and of course sporting activities. Now, so in many ways, in fact, our genesis really started with a strong partnership and presence in the arts. If you come forward today, our 10-year strategy is built around 5 key public health imperatives. It's around limiting or reducing or ending tobacco. It's around reducing the harms from alcohol. It's about getting more good quality fresh food into the hands of more Victorians. It's about getting Victorians moving and enjoying being active, and it's about improving the mental health and wellbeing. And the arts are really critical to every single one of those. We often think about arts as being important for social connection, a really important precursor for mental health and well-being. We sometimes think about, the arts as a way of getting thousands of people into the streets, into the city, off to regional Victoria to really enjoy, participation, active participation in events. But it really does touch on all of the different areas of work that we do, everything from our partnership in tobacco with the Quit Foundation. I mean, if you think about how do we communicate with the public about quitting smoking, it's through emotive storytelling. It's through design-based, really clearly understood that manages to transgress cultural and language barriers. It's about health messaging that's often not about the words, but it's actually about the imagery, the emotion, the movement, the connection that comes with that. And so certainly art and the creative industry has been a really important partner, in all of our tobacco work. The same in terms of physical activity, as we said, and certainly the same in terms of the other areas, particularly mental health. So if you're thinking about a way, I suppose, of getting Victorians active, connected, healthy, and resilient, the arts has to be front and centre. In addition to that, of course, it's the role that the arts sector and communities that, the role of the arts sector more broadly as well. It really is an engine for creativity, for community, and for connection across Victoria. And so there are so many co-benefits that come from investing in the arts, in addition to the direct health benefits that it brings for Victorians that engage, and are inspired by it.
Absolutely. And this is something that we talk about quite a bit in these studio sessions, or that we touch on, I suppose, quite a bit on these studio sessions. And it's around those kind of flow-on effects that we call them, or those intangible benefits that you get from the arts, and, how we measure those benefits, because we all know that when it comes to putting in your funding submissions, trying to get money out of the government for whatever it is, statistics and dollars, and those kinds of things are important, and, rightly so. And there are ways of measuring those things, but a conversation that is often had is around those intangible benefits that the arts give us, and how do we measure those, and how do we show that there is even more benefit, I suppose, on top of the economic benefit that the arts brings to the economy. And so given that COVID has had such a significant impact on the creative industries, as it has across many industries, obviously, and given the importance that the arts and the creative industries has on the health of Victorians and the general population as a whole, do you think there's an argument that can be made to government regarding funding of the arts that's more than just an economic one? If if I was to quote some figures just for Victoria, in Victoria alone, creative industries contributed $22.7 billion to the economy, which was more than construction, which was $19.8 billion. Yet at a federal level, at least, what we see is a stimulus package that's geared towards the construction industry, rather than a stimulus package that's geared towards the creative industries. So even with that economic argument, that funding isn't there. So do we need to be talking more about those health benefits that the creative industries can bring to the fore?
I think the answer is absolutely yes, but it's more than talking. It's speaking the language of policy and effectively influencing policymakers and decision makers. I mean, if you think about across COVID, I remember Benjamin Law, put it really, really well, I thought, early in the pandemic. I mean, how are we staying connected across the pandemic through journalism and through the arts? How are we getting our information through journalism and then through creative translation through the arts? How are we, stopping ourselves from going bored? What do we turn to on a weekend to keep ourselves entertained and therefore be able to keep Victorians home and and protected? Well, most of us are turning on Netflix or turning on the ABC or turning on the radio, which again is the arts. I think most of us are utilising and seeing the benefits of the arts in every aspect of our lives, probably more so during coronavirus. I think it's been critical to keeping Victorians safe, and it will be critical to recovery. I don't need convincing. We've just announced a $2.5 million grant round for which a major focus of that will be supporting local arts organisations to do what they do well, which is to connect communities, to inspire communities, and to protect, ultimately to improve the mental and physical health of communities. I think that there is work to be done to convince federal politicians in particular of the importance. I think the arts community probably has been largely ignored in most of the major response and recovery efforts by federal government. I think here in Victoria, we've seen a much stronger response of support. I think we can, we can always do better, and we'd like to see more funding, particularly for local arts organisations, regional arts organisations, and those arts organisations that are truly supporting and working with the most marginalised communities across the state. And again, all we can do is lead by example, which is why we've just committed $2.5 million in funding to support those very organisations, as well as other community organisations in doing what they do well, which is understanding the needs of their local community and delivering solutions that are appropriate and community-led.
Fantastic. That's great that that round of funding has just been announced. What we might do is see if we can put a link to that in the comments on Facebook so that people can have a look at that, because there are opportunities abound there. What did you say? $2.5 million, I think.
That's right.
Now, for those people who are watching via Facebook, as always, we encourage you to ask questions throughout this, and we will try and answer them as we go along. So if you do have any questions for our panelists in specific regards to creativity and health, please do ask. Now, I might cut across to Rob now and see. Rob, can you hear me?
I can.
Fantastic, and we can hear you. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, one of the reasons that I really wanted to speak to you today was because of a great initiative I heard that you had implemented there at Bendigo Health, the music program within the Cancer Centre. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you felt that was important and a little bit more about the program?
Yeah, so I mean, it actually started with a relatively simple prompt from a then younger child at home who asked whether work was fun, and I said fun's probably not a word that I'd use for working in a cancer centre. I said, but I said it can be funny, and it made me think. Well, realistically, it's a really challenging experience for people that come into a cancer centre. It can often be quite clinical, And I thought, I think it'd be important to sort of humanise the experience a little bit, and then started to think about more deeply about the health benefits of something like music that we could introduce into the department. And then from that, I recognised that there aren't many health organisations that have music programs. There are some, and the Children's Hospital is probably one that has the greatest program for their patients and families. And I felt that it was something that we could initiate within the cancer centre. It also meant that it gave people in the community an opportunity to sort of, I suppose, contribute to that program and also get some benefits from it themselves. So it started off in that respect. We then started to get some support from the Alumbra Foundation and also Stratagem, and then developed a program with a music coordinator. And currently, what we're trying to do is try and expand that so that it can be utilised in other parts of the hospital besides just the cancer centre. The challenge that we've had more recently has been COVID, because basically the hospital has had to basically stop volunteers from coming into the hospital. And so what we're currently working on very hard is a concept of using a virtual platform to deliver, I suppose, the music program and think of it in a different way, as well as incorporating other aspects of wellness with the program. So that's where we're currently at the moment, because I'm not clear. I don't think anybody is where COVID's going to end, and so I think it's forced us to think in a different way. But it's pretty clear to me that, as has been spoken about before, with the degree of isolation that people are having, with the increased stress mentally, I think this is more important than ever that there's a role for this. But we have to approach it in a different way. So that's sort of where we're up to at the moment. But there's lots of clear evidence has already been articulated in terms of the benefits of the arts, in terms of providing people with connectivity. There are sort of benefits in terms of health, things such as mental relieving anxiety and depression. There's even evidence to suggest that it can have impacts on the immune system and those sorts of things. I think there's evolving evidence with that, but traditionally that hasn't been the focus of the health system until more recently. It's been about disease rather than wellness, and I think that's the other issue that we're really trying to focus on. That both in terms of the absence of illness isn't health, and so we've got to take a different approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned there that COVID has kind of hampered, I suppose, the process a little bit in terms of the music program. When I was doing a little bit of research in preparation for this, I found that using music therapy, we see similar results with visual and expressive arts as well, but using music therapy with cancer patients increases patients' sense of control, promotion of wellness, and the healthy aspects of patients' lives, reductions in pain and increases in immunity, decreases in anxiety, and reductions in psychological and physical symptoms. I appreciate that you may not have had a long enough run at this, but did you have any anecdotal kind of evidence of seeing some of those benefits come through?
I think the biggest issue, that we got from patient feedback was that it made the experience less daunting. It particularly reduced their anxieties, particularly when they were having to sort of wait in the waiting rooms. But to be clear, I mean, this is not music therapy in the I suppose the traditional sense, in the sense that it's not with a music therapist, but it's introducing music into the department. And as I said, one of the other things that we had is we actually had some of our own patients that were musicians who would actually contribute to the program, and they also felt that they were giving back and helping others. So certainly we got that sort of anecdotal sort of evidence. but I think that we certainly want to develop it further than it was, and be a little bit more strategic in our approach. So that's the field that we're currently working in, is developing that virtual platform, and I think also broadening it and promoting it in that way. I think when it first started, it was more about again, providing people with an environment that wasn't so daunting and reducing anxiety. But I think we can probably be a little bit more targeted with that approach in terms of how it's delivered.
Yeah. Now, you touched there about creativity boosting immunity. I think, and that's also something I found in my research. So I found that there was a randomized trial with HIV patients that showed that expressive writing boosted their immune system. Chronic pain management, inflammatory responses, art and writing can help us process and deal with emotional and psychological trauma. Creative performance and practice have been proven to improve the effectiveness of conventional medical treatment on physical and mental health as well. Now, I know we've talked all about all of that a bit broadly. I've got a bit of a technical question because I knew there were two doctors on the panel today. What's going on in our bodies when all that happens? Like, if it's boosting our immunity, how is that happening? What's going on? There must be some chemical reaction happening or something.
Well, certainly, again, I'm not a physiologist, but certainly there's been, evidence to suggest that when you sort of, reduce sort of the cortisol levels and those sorts of things, it can have an impact on sort of the way in which some of the components of the immune system sort of function. So I suppose one of the theories might be that it's working in that regard. But I don't have a more scientific explanation for that. I don't know if my colleague has a better explanation for it than that, but I would imagine that's partly the way in which it would work.
Yeah, I would have thought the same, mediated through cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which when elevated can decrease your immune response or suppress your immune response. But I don't know more than that.
Right. Okay.
Magic of music.
Well, absolutely. We'll come back to music in a moment, but I just want to maybe bring Jim back into the conversation here. Sandro, when you were talking before, you referenced a focus that VicHealth has, I think, and maybe it was before we went live, on youth and connecting youth into arts and local creativity. There's a lot of evidence out there that shows that becoming involved in arts and creativity early on in the life cycle has benefits throughout life. And I know that VicHealth obviously have the focus here. Are we doing enough as a community, as a society, do you think, to engage young people early on? What specifically are VicHealth doing in this regard?
We do prioritise a lot of our work and a lot of our investments toward organisations that are targeting young people as participants, not necessarily solely young people as participants, but potential for intergenerational participation as well. So arts creates opportunities for young people to share experiences, both with older community members, but also across different cultural communities. There has been a waning of the prominence of arts activities in schools. There are many more schools nowadays that don't include arts curricula, and if they do, it's very limited and very sporadic. There are a whole range of different community structures that have resource challenges in delivering arts activities to young people. So a lot of our programs are hoping to supplement those activities. And often there's an interrogation required by arts organisations, cultural sector more broadly, to not necessarily assume that young people are necessarily going to connect with the product that's offered. There really needs to be a co-design element incorporating the opinions and the expert knowledge that young people have as to what other young people are going to want to access their programs. So it's not necessarily just rolling out programs to young people, but a deeper level of engagement that creates a more authentic benefit for young participants.
I must admit, I'm just sort of listening to what people are saying, and I'm sort of thinking, if you think about the way in which health is promoted, generally speaking, there's a focus on exercise, there's a focus on diet, not smoking, not drinking. I just wonder whether the benefits of, the arts is communicated, as well as it might be, both to policymakers but also to the general public. Like, I think if you ask the average person down the street, unless they were intimately involved in the arts, I don't know that the average person would actually recognise that those benefits are there. And I just sort of think that, that's probably something that that probably needs a bit of focus in terms of like educating the general public. But I also think that it's concerning that our policies are actually undermining the roles, because certainly if you go back 50 years ago, my understanding is that a teacher couldn't become a teacher unless they actually had some sort of music capacity, whether it was playing the piano or the guitar or singing or whatever else. It was part of the core components of their skill set. So I think that there's a disconnect there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's definitely a role for not just politicians, but a whole range of different civic leaders to demonstrate leadership on this issue. So I think it's not just a connection in the public mind between the health and wellbeing benefits of arts, but a lot of people aren't necessarily aware that the activities they're engaging in are essentially arts and creative activities.
I think that's a big issue, and actually, I think it's gone even further, Jim. I think we've almost adopted, as we have, a sort of anti-expert narrative in many parts of the world, and it's becoming very difficult in terms of the erosion of the trust in science or the concept of expert. I think the same thing with the arts, that it's being sort of pigeonholed as a kind of nice to have, rather than really being seen as a critical investment in the social, cultural, and health fabric of societies. And I think you're absolutely right. Most people don't even realise that what they're actually interacting with is the arts. And I think that was the point that, again, Ben Law was trying to make. In every aspect of our COVID life, we're being supported by the arts. What's keeping us together, what's keeping us home, what's keeping us informed, what's keeping us safe is the arts. And we don't see it that way. We celebrate doctors and nurses, as we should, but actually the arts are playing an enormous role in keeping us all safe, at home, informed, and mentally well.
Absolutely. And there is, if I had much longer time, a lot I would like to unpick in there, but I'm going to bite my tongue just for a moment, because there's a couple of questions come up in the chat I see, so I might just have a quick look through there. So we've got a question here from Tanya. How do each of the panelists see the role of creative arts therapists in their respective art and health roles interests? They are an underutilized and underconsulted professional specialists, especially at this time. So there are arts therapists that focus on this very topic, I suppose. Do any of our panelists have any thoughts on that?
I'd say Rob's the expert.
We have used art therapy. I know in one of the programs in the palliative unit. I would love to introduce it into the program we've got. I think that often, like anything else, with the program that we've had to actually establish, it's come through philanthropic support. It's not been funded within the health organisation itself. So it's although it's been supported, it's been driven by funds that we've actually had to generate through working with other sort of companies, or other organisations. So I think it's a great idea, and we have seen it actually work in the palliative setting. Yeah, and it certainly is something that we are, when we're thinking about our wellness program, it's something that we're looking at. But again, it's often comes down to dollars, and that's one of the big sort of barriers, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Rob. I'm just having a look at another question here from Punctum. So Punctum are a performing arts institute just down the highway there somewhere, I think. A great subject. Could you speak to what you understand the health industry brings to artists and creatives as a professional working environment, further to the context in which many of you are already working? I might have to read that. Did you guys understand that one? I might have to Could you speak to what you understand the health industry brings to artists and creatives as a professional working environment, further to the context in which many are already working? It's in transdisciplinary sense, really. HQ Punctum, you may have to clarify the question a little bit, and we'll see if we can answer that one for you. I might just come back to what we were talking about before. We are actually at a time now, I believe, where the word arts, for the first time in a long time, no longer appears in any of the ministry titles at a federal level. It's been consolidated into one of the other ministries. And we were talking there about how the art curriculum in schools is probably struggling a little bit more when competing against other more traditional, shall we say, topics like English and maths. I watched an interesting TEDx talk recently by Ken Robinson called Schools Kill Creativity. And whatever you think about that actual topic, he did raise some interesting points in there, because Jim was saying before, that VicHealth are looking to supplement art activities within schools. And it's interesting how VicHealth are looking to supplement those art activities. And Rob, how you're talking about philanthropic funding coming into play to fund art therapists. So there does still seem to be this resistance, I suppose, to understand the role that it plays. But then when we look at things like the arts participation survey that's just come out, and there is a big representation of people who say that they engage with creativity, engage with the arts for their well-being and for their health, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect. And I'm wondering how we fix that.
I think, I know, I'm just thinking, obviously, at your question. I think if you have a look at least how some of the health organisations work, and if you look at what they get measured to establish whether they're successful in what they're doing or not, that component isn't articulated. If you look at, accrediting a particular service, there are certain things that are expected. So I think that when an aspect of isn't overt in the way that it's assessed, then that I think speaks. So I think in some respects you have to have a look at whatever you're delivering or providing. I think it's got to be articulated in policy overtly. Otherwise, it can be I suppose missed or omitted, if that makes sense. Because I think that if you say these are our 10 core pillars of how we do things, and it's overtly stated that it's very clear to everybody, well, this is one of the things that we'd expect that you would deliver. But if it's something that's inferred or it's a bit soft, I think that can sometimes make it challenging unless you've got someone who's a leader or someone that's driving it within your organisation.
Yeah, so Sandro, I suppose an obvious question here then is, how do VicHealth measure the impact of their initiatives that incorporate creative and health practices? Or, how do you say this has worked? What do you bring? What statistics or what measures into place?
Yeah, well, certainly, what gets measured gets done, but also I think what gets measured and really gets valued and retained, and that's I think the really important point that Rob was trying to make. So whenever in fact, some of our major arts investments are actually not in the arts programs themselves, and Jim can speak to this. It's in the evaluation of them, because if we can invest some money to support a rigorous evaluation to really show the return on investment, that wider return on investment that you were talking about before, not just the direct economic benefits, but the indirect benefits, then it does allow you to build an investment case. It allows you to hold, local governments and state and federal governments, to hold discussions with them to really understand and to speak a language across different portfolios and ministries. I do think, the issue of not having a minister that is focused on the arts at the federal level. I mean, there are actually a few portfolios that seem to be missing their own focus at the federal level, and I think it shows a lack of prioritization and probably priority, and that's something that we should be concerned about, because that will ultimately lead to less investment, a lower return on that investment, and then we won't get those really important benefits that we know we can get and we currently get and we've had for a long time from the arts. So we make sure that our investments are not just in the arts programs themselves, and sometimes I suppose there's also a role for the arts community, for our partners, who might feel disappointed that the money isn't all going into programs. But all of the partners we work with are fully committed to evaluating their programs, because they know they work. They see the benefits, and to have someone actually rigorously evaluate them independently and then be able to report on that value to health, to society, to regional communities, to the economy, and done from an organisation like VicHealth with our stamp on it, that can really help beyond the dollars we give directly. But Jim's really, can speak to this area more closely.
Yes, our current strategy is being evaluated by the Centre for Program Evaluation at University of Melbourne. And as Sandro mentioned, like our hope is that the findings of that evaluation can be used by the sector more broadly. Unfortunately, we will never have a resource base to fund nearly as many of the arts projects as we might like to. But what we are able to do is document models and approaches that are most likely to lead to successful outcomes, whilst also identifying the pitfalls and challenges and how to address those that might be faced by some projects, so they don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel either. In some respects, also
Jim, sorry, David, I'm going to have to leave the panel, but thank you very much for having me, and we look forward to coming and visiting as soon as we possibly can, and seeing the great work you're doing again in person. And Rob, thanks very much for your time as well. It can't be easy given everything that you're doing, protecting and serving communities at the moment in the middle of a pandemic, to find half an hour to join this important conversation. But I certainly really value it, and also the contribution you're bringing to Bendigo at the moment. So thanks very much for having me, David. I've got to run, but thank you, and we'll speak soon.
Thanks so much, Sandro.
Thanks, Sandro.
Yeah, fantastic. And well, we don't have too much longer to go now. So what I might just do is, I've just got a couple of other things. HQ Punctum have reframed. So let's have another go at HQ Punctum's question. As artists, we are very familiar with articulating what creative practice brings health and wellness benefits. Yes. What is less articulated is what working in the health industry brings to artists. When working across disciplines in a health industry setting, it's important to be able to articulate this as a shared understanding. Now, Rob, you are a creative as well as working in the health industry.
Yeah.
The question there, if I'm understanding it correctly, is whether working within that industry brings anything to creativity.
So it's interesting actually, because I've thought about, what is creative and what is art. I think sometimes the concept of things that are artistic and creative can sometimes be somewhat narrow, because I suppose creativity to me is thinking in a different way, or in approaching a problem or an issue or a situation. So it might not be artistic, but you might approach things in a way that is different, or creating new ways of approaching things, and that is being creative. But I think sometimes when people think about someone being creative, or someone they're thinking about artistic endeavors, but that's probably one spectrum of creativity, I suppose. But if I think about the where art and health meet, I think that historically that hasn't been overt. It's been again, we're talking about this in this sort of forum, but it's not something that people intrinsically think about when they're looking at wellness of people. At least in a health provider situation. But I think that it should, and I think that it's going to require greater education and greater thinking. I'll give you an example. So if you think about the field that I work in, which is in cancer, historically what the focus was about the disease and what treatment might be required so that someone could hopefully be cured or live longer. More recently, when we're looking at wellness and those sorts of issues, exercise has become a really big key. There's been a lot of research and interest in the fact that exercise can decrease fatigue, can decrease side effect and toxicities, can improve deliverability of treatment, and potentially may have an impact on survival, for example. That's relatively new, as in like years. And I think that the arts and health, is not quite there just yet, but I think that it could easily be, so that you could say in your palette of wellness, well, you go see the exercise physiologist, you see, your counselor or your whatever else, you do your yoga, you consider, what arts are appropriate for you in achieving that. But I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. I think that understanding of health professionals in terms of the importance and the influence and the opportunities is not there. It's not I don't believe it's part of their education process. It's not part of the palliative suites that we currently have routinely in all hospitals. I think what it needs people to drive it. And as I said, there are some very good programs in hospitals like the Children's, which is exemplary. And I think, I think we just need people to start driving that and showing some really good deliverables and models that people can adopt. That's the other thing. It's like sometimes you just need to have someone who's done it before who can tell you how to get there.
Yeah.
There's some interesting points that Rob raised there about creativity versus arts. So one statistic I really like is Michigan State University, about a decade or so ago, did a scan of prize-winning scientists, Nobel Prize, Royal Academy, etc., and they found that 3 times as many of the prize winners had long-term artistic hobbies in comparison to the general public. So they'd built in this kind of creative thinking and plasticity into their lives that had benefits in their professional outcomes. And on a similar topic, we have a program at the moment called Art of Good Health, where we are establishing partnerships between arts and creative organisations, local government, and health promotion-focused organisations to bring them around the table and find a sweet spot where they can work together for a whole range of different health outcomes, ranging from establishing healthy eating programs in Shepparton, We have a project, the Cultural Pharmacy Project in Castlemaine, which at the moment is a really developmental stage, but is looking at that kind of prescription model for how creative engagement can have benefits, and be built into health sector initiatives.
I think there are a few interesting points in there, and that example that you give about the Nobel Prize winners, etc., having the creative endeavors that they pursue, and you touched upon it as well about creative thinking, Rob. People may or may not be familiar with the term STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths. And there's also now the term STEAM that people are using, because that people are putting arts in there as a really critical part of it, because of the way that arts get us thinking differently in terms of solving problems. So it's now science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths. So I think it's a really interesting way to think about it. I know that musicians, for example, are known for using both sides of their brains at once, and that's one of the benefits that come from being a musician. So that helps people in terms of their creative thinking. I've got probably one last question, which I wanted to put to you. I think probably for this whole session, for anyone who's been tuning in, we're probably preaching to the converted. I think people who are watching is probably nodding their head going, of course, creativity has many health benefits. I myself am in a band, and I often have been found to tell people that one of the great things about being in the band is the fact it is for my own mental health and mental well-being, not just the fact that we create music together, but the fact that we get to see each other. I get to see my friends, I get to engage with them, that kind of social aspect of it. I actually ended up going to boot camp with two of my bandmates, which wouldn't have happened. So there's all those kind of flow-ons as well. But so there'd be a lot of people who already know that. My question, I suppose, to you guys that I'd like to finish on is that there are a lot of people out there though, who don't feel a strong sense of connectedness to creativity. They don't feel creative in any way, shape, or form. And what message, if any, do you have for those people? If there is such a strong connection between creativity and health, if you're a person who doesn't consider themselves to be creative in any way.
I don't know. I would have thought, I'm just thinking about, again, some of the things that you've mentioned about, group activities on, and there's lots of examples, for example, where there are community choirs. I think the reality is you don't have to be proficient in the activity to get the benefits.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that.
Yeah.
My bandmates would tell you that's probably true for me. I'm getting more benefit than I am putting in. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a case. Mastery isn't required, and nobody is going to graduate in their first half hour of engagement with any particular art form. Nobody's going to become a professional, or it's whether or not people are interested in going along for the journey, or just taking a little taste test. And at the moment, in a lockdown environment that many of us are in, we have a level of privacy where, we can try all things without peer pressure, without necessarily everybody knowing that we tried and failed. It's a great opportunity for people to dip their toe into new territory, and if they like it, to shout from the hills and tell everybody else about it. And if they don't, move on and try something else.
Absolutely. No one would have liked to have been exposed to my bass playing last night as I was trying to fumble my way through how to play a bass guitar. But anyway, thank you so much, Rob. Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you to Sandro, obviously, who has had to go at this point. It's been great to hear your perspectives on the value of creativity for our health and well-being. I do very much value the time that you've given up for this. I will just close off by giving a quick plug to some upcoming sessions we have. So we've got another studio session next week, which is around business incubation programs for creative people. We've got Also, some business programs coming up. We've got being run by a local accountancy firm, AFS, one on business planning and one on key metrics for keeping your business on track, which are designed specifically for creative industries. And they're all free sessions. So go on our website and sign up for those. That would be great. We also have something called Share and Connect, which is like an online networking. They can all be found on our website and Facebook pages. But for now, it just remains for me to say thank you and good evening.
Okay, thank
Stay
you.
safe.
See you.
Thank
See
you,
you.
David.